watched it about. Anyway, and we're live.
Hey. What's up?
So it just popped up saying I've got mail. Enough of that. I'm not looking at the mail now. We're doing Homicide, Life on the Street, Scene of the Crime, I think it is, Jeff.
Yes, which was season 4, episode 21, although it was actually the 18th one broadcast on April 12th, 1996 on NBC. And it was a group effort on the writing, story by Henry Brummel and Barry Levinson and Tom Fontana, and the teleplay was written by Anya Epstein and David Simon, and it was directed by Kathy Bates. And here's a brief recap of what happened. Lewis and Kellerman arrive at a scene in the projects where a young man has been thrown off a building from 9 stories high. There's an angry crowd surrounding the scene and people throwing things. A Muslim leader comes forward dressed in a suit, appearing to thrive in front of the camera. This Muslim named Ismail al-Hajj tries to calm the crowd down, saying that someone selling poison to his own people has been murdered, telling the crowd to back off and let the police do their thing. Back at the precinct, the detectives are in G's office. G says it's an insult to pay people to police the projects. Lewis says to G that since the Muslims have been around there has been little crime in the area. G rebuts this, mentioning that the crime has just been pushed to other areas, and sends the detectives back to the projects to gather more information. A police officer is seen in his parked car eating a sandwich. This officer hears a dispatch. Shots have been fired in the area, so he says he is on his way. When the officer arrived, he stops like a deer in headlights when he hears shots being fired and sees one man chasing after another. Later, Munch and Russert arrive at this scene and find 2 bodies, 2 weapons, as well as a possible motive, a bag of drugs. Back at the precinct, Munch tells Russert that both guns match the bullets in the 2 dead bodies in the drug-related shootings. Munch also says that he has done all the paperwork and has put the 2 names up on the board in black. Russert tells Munch his paperwork is incomplete and also wants to talk to the victims' relatives. Munch and Russert then interview a mother of one of the victims, and she says that she heard the shooting go on for at least 10 minutes. Russert later digs up information and realizes that Officer Stu Gardy took much too long to arrive at the scene. Realizing something doesn't add up, the detectives talk to Officer Gardy. Howard tells Russert it's time to involve internal affairs in the matter after Gardy didn't call for backup and waited too long as one of the shooting victims bled to death. Lewis and Kellerman track down Ishmael, and after he puts his hand on Kellerman, they take him back to the box to grill him. Kellerman begins to wonder what side Lewis is on after he doesn't stick up for him during the altercation, or in the box when Ishmael makes some racial remarks. Barnfather later storms into G's office and tells them that Lewis and Kellerman are off the case after they charged Ishmael. Munch gets a hold of Bolander, who says he will make an appearance at the detective's bar that night. Munch has a newfound skip in his step after hearing this and proceeds to tell his fellow detectives the big news involving Stan, the big man Bolander. Later on at the bar, Munch is anxious, telling Kellerman he finally gets to meet Bolander, saying some kind words about his former partner. Bayless gets off the phone and tells Munch that something came up and Bolander can't make it. Munch takes back the kind words he told Kellerman and proceeds to do a shot of liquor. Private court and testify after Internal Affairs investigated Officer Gardy. Gardy mentions he was afraid and doesn't remember if he called for backup. Gardy eventually gets off as the jury finds that he was in fear for his life. G grills Ishmael in the box with Lewis and Kellerman looking on. Lewis gets a second chance to stick up for his partner when Ishmael says he will only give information if Kellerman leaves the room. Lewis points toward Kellerman and tells Ishmael that he stays. The detectives are seen raiding a house that is empty. Lewis says the leader gave them a name, but not the guy. Okay, now let's see what Mr. Morris had to say about this one. Technically speaking, according to the show and the board, this episode was the next to last episode in the 4th season. However, given the events in episode 420, which we will explore in time, it is very difficult to believe that Lewis would be on the job. Problems with numbers aside, Scene of the Crime is one of the most troubling episodes the series would do, dealing with 2 controversial questions. Are the police really effective when it comes to dealing with drugs, and can the black community trust the police? Question 1 comes into play when Lewis and Kellerman investigate the murder of a drug dealer in Highland Terrace and run into a wall of hostility, part of which comes from the residents, but also comes from a group of Muslims who we see have managed to maintain peace and order where the cops have not. There has been a great deal of hostility towards the black Muslims in the past few years, and they are very hostile towards the police, specifically Kellerman, who is the wrong race. The Muslims would prove fascinating for Tom Fontana. A year later, he would explore their religion still further in the HBO drama Oz. But it is very clear that they have been doing good work, even if, as G suggests, the violence and drugs are only being moved a few blocks away. And Lewis, in particular, seems somewhat impressed by what they have managed to accomplish where normal policing has failed. This brings up, for the first time between Mike and Meldrick, the issue of race. It is clear that the case gets under each other's skin. However, in the end, asked to choose black or blue, Lewis chooses the latter. When the murderer gets away because of the Muslims' intervention, he is enraged and upset. The second question deals with an even more troubling problem. Officer Stugardi is dispatched to a shooting at a housing project a couple of blocks away. When he arrives, however, he hears the shots being fired and goes back into his squad car. Sometime later, Munch and Russert arrive and learn from Gardy that the two drug dealers ran into the basement and killed each other. Munch has no problem writing this up as a double murder. Russert, however, presses forward and learns that the mothers of the victims called the cops when they heard the shooting, and it took half an hour for them to arrive. Things get even murkier when Russert presses Gardy, and he refuses to state one way or the other whether he called for backup. This is dereliction of duty. But consider, Gardy is over 50 and is armed with just his service piece. He could have easily been killed or opened up a can of worms if he ended up killing one of the shooters. Reluctantly, Russert brings the case before a board of inquiry. Gardy is eventually cleared of all responsibility. However, he is unsettled enough that he admits to Russert that he was too scared to go into the firefight. Peter Garrity gives a superb performance, showing both the good and bad about this troubled cop. As it turns out, Gardy's work in the Baltimore PD has just begun, though we won't learn this until later. There are no easy answers for any of the questions raised in this episode. Yes, the Muslims are wrong to manipulate race for political advantage, but it is far removed from the political manipulations that the brass uses to get them out of the terrace. Yes, technically Gardy should have gone into the project, but should we really expect a 50-ish cop to go into a building where two young, heavily armed teenagers are shooting up the place? Police are public servants, but they're not superheroes. In addition to all this excellence, we also finally see the real differences between Giardello and Russert's leadership. Russert, even though she is reluctant to do so, goes after a fellow police officer rather than support him. G, on the other hand, fully stands behind his detectives, supporting Russert's decision to move forward. He also does one of his most masterful manipulations of the bosses. After Barnfather tells G to stop the investigation of the murder in Highland Terrace, G agrees and promptly leaks this to the press the minute the colonel is out of his office. The next day, Barnfather puts them back on the case. Even the lighter moments in this episode have a ring of pain behind them. Munch yearns for the return of Bolander, who he has not heard from, even though he has called 26 times without getting a response. He finally thinks Stan is going to show up at the waterfront, only to be let down when Bolander not only cancels, but does so without even talking to Munch. Poor John. As it turns out, his partnership problems are only going to get worse. Essentially, though, Scene of the Crime is a very serious episode. Like many episodes, the issues are not black and white, but rather gray, and this time the gray involves the police. As Russert puts it, if the people don't trust the police and we don't trust each other, who can we trust? This question has come up before on Homicide and will come up again, but there's still no easy answer. My score, 9.5. That's what he says. Ben, what do you say?
Well, I've got quite a few things to say. I thought it was very good with the issues that it presented. Group being very, very similar to the Nation of Islam, with all of the positives and negatives that people talk about them. The only aspect, and I didn't really think of it at the time, now in hindsight, is I found the Munch thing about Bolander that he didn't turn up, because we know, I mean, it would be nice if he turned up, because we know he left, but
right,
just to like tease the audience like that. I mean, I thought he probably wouldn't turn up because of like the way he left, but it's just like,
you mean they should have had him turn in a cameo appearance like Blake?
Yeah.
And then
yes,
he's
or
really
just not have
there.
it. You know what I mean? But to say, "Oh, we're going to have him come," and then he doesn't arrive.
Yeah, it sounds familiar for some reason. Like I've been put through this before.
Yeah, but with Blake, at least that was a plot point, though.
Well, this was a plot point too.
Well, how did it affect the Lewis plot? And
It didn't affect Lewis's plot, but it affected Munch and Russert some.
Yeah, okay. If it had like a better anecdote from John Munch, like a story about something that he and Bolander did
Well, yeah,
in the past.
and it's possible that could have been in there and cut for time. You never know. But I will say that what Munch says about Bolander when the Kellerman asks why is he called the big man, that may be why that David Simon's credited as a writer on this. I don't know if he wrote other parts or not, but what Munch says about Bolander is taken directly, almost word for word, from the book in the description of the real big man from Baltimore Homicide. So that gave an opportunity for Munch to quote the book.
Now, this guy on screen at the moment, is he like the real life, not G, but D?
Yes, he is.
Right.
And we've seen him before in Homicide as the QRT commander guy,
Yep.
and he'll be back again in that role.
Yep.
In this one, apparently, he was on this disciplinary board.
Now, is he playing the same character?
I don't know because they don't. I'm not sure. I don't think they actually list, who he plays in the cast. So
yeah, because he didn't speak. So
well, he did.
He's
speak.
not there, is he? Oh, he did.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. Because he said stuff at the beginning when he read the charges, and then he, so.
Oh yes, of course.
She was probably in the co-stars at the beginning as far as the credits, but
right. Well, I've got
Gary
some of that.
that's his name. Yeah.
So we've got Victor Williams. Does he ring a bell?
No, but I'm guessing Peter Garrity. That's his name is right under him. That's who he is right there.
Yeah.
Gardy. You'll see him again.
Max Perdick didn't do much work in this episode.
Yeah, not very much. Just got the stuff thrown at him while he was filming people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing that the Victor Williams is probably Ishmael. I'm guessing that's who he is.
Yeah, he was quite good. Yeah, it was something interesting. Of course, he would have done it maybe he did it for theatrical reasons as well, but like his was quite impressive. When he was talking to the crowd, this character, and then he could have been doing that to make an impression, but sort of like after that, I don't know if his vocabulary went a bit more normal or not. I wasn't sort of like looking out for that, but I mean, this type of role, they sort of like know. It's like if you have a preacher, they sort of like know how to go into a sort of mode to appeal to people, to like that kind of thing.
Yeah, he had sort of an affectation that he did.
Yeah, and so this was this sort of like affected speaking to the group kind of mode. I also wondered, like, the level of depth and nuance in it makes me wonder, like, was there any sort of like real life influences that maybe was covered in the book? Or I know these like were things that were going on at the time, like with the Nation of Islam. I just wondered if there were similar things, like there were these kind of like activities with these kind of like
yes. I'm not sure about whether the part about federal government funding was accurate. I don't know whether that was. I mean, I assume it was somewhat based on reality, but I don't know, the actual details of any of that. But I know that in general, it was based on real events.
Yeah. And HUD, folks, is the housing. Is it housing and urban development?
Yes.
Right. Yes, Gardy, a good enough performance by the guy playing it. Yeah, I like the plot point. Yeah, David Morris didn't mention that sort of like reasonable doubts was created by the idea of like if there's two calls coming at once, one of them gets blocked. So that was the sort of like just a little bit of doubt that enabled him to get off.
Yeah, and that was a return appearance too by both of those sort of department lawyers that were in as part of that. We've seen both of them previously in other times. The woman defending Gardy was the one that told Lewis when he got into his driving incident to say he didn't remember anything, including whether he was wearing a seatbelt or not.
Yeah, we got that defense. I mean, was it? I think it was. Was it an attorney general? Was it like George Bush's? Was it Gonzalez? And he was like, I can't recall all the while. And that's what they always do now. So
yeah,
they get
I know
trapped in
Oliver
a
North
lie.
said that a bunch of times when the Iran Contra hearings. Oliver North kept saying, I do not recall.
And it becomes a bit of a joke that they're always doing it now.
Yeah, well, I think we had a good thing about the character you got on screen there was that he, was somebody who was educated and aware of the law, so he pointed out something that often, people being questioned don't do, which is he said, if I'm not charged with a crime, I don't have to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of people, are easily intimidated by police and authority figures, so they will continue a conversation even though they don't legally have to. That whole right to remain silent thing also doesn't get utilized that much in a lot of cases.
These look like sort of like Malcolm X type glasses, even though it's...
Yeah, they definitely were going for that look with him. That's true.
Yeah. So we could sort of like go through some of these. And oh yes, that was good as well. Sort of like Lewis's ambivalent feelings towards this sort of like Nation of Islam-esque group. And he had, and it certainly played it where he had some mixed feelings about it, like sort of like up to this point here. There was some good close-ups of him like thinking about it.
Yeah.
He's setting up. Maybe he becomes a Muslim in future. I don't know. Right.
Yeah. So we've already had episodes where, G has had to come to that, has talked about his decision where he basically had to choose.
Yeah, black and blue.
Or whatever, and Lewis, we have an example of a similar situation here.
Now,
where he points out some of the positives of the Muslim group controlling the stuff themselves, and why that would be a problem, whereas it's not a problem for private security in white neighborhoods or whatever. But at the same time, he also wants to do his job, and he doesn't use that as a reason to be against the police.
Now, this Levinsky, part of this, or was this like was this in a previous episode, or was this covered, Levinsky?
I don't specifically remember Levinsky.
Then we got Peter Williams, Peter Garrity, the little fella, Max Perlick. Kathy Bates. Yeah. Right. Bookus. I think some of these we've now the Bungie one. Did we cover that? Was that sort of an unresolved one?
Well, evidently it hasn't been solved, yes. I don't know if that was mentioned in an episode at all.
Then we've got this Valley, and then Hans. Did we cover that? Sabatino, have we done that? Was that another?
No, though Sabatino will be mentioned in the future. That I remember.
Right.
But not for a while.
Hermos. Right. And what about this Hermos one? Was that related to this episode?
Yeah, that was the 14-year-old kid.
Right.
They got shot. The one that bled to death.
We've got the terrace.
Yeah.
Right. Kellerman. But what about this Faber one? Was that one of the cases?
I think so. I don't remember who Farber was. I do still remember who Damon was, because that's the one that killed the cop and then got killed by the cop's son.
Yeah. Right. What about the one where you had the guy called Pratt and he was killed? Did they find his killer?
No.
Right. So I wonder if that's still up on the board somewhere, or does it get taken off if it's like a previous year or something?
Yeah, they start with the clean slate on the new year.
Right. Now, who the heck does he look like, Jeff? Which sportsman does he look like? NFL player, former NFL player.
It's funny because I started thinking of like other people before you said that, and then I'm like, you talking about Phil Simms?
Yes, Phil Simms, totally.
Okay. Because I was thinking maybe he had a little bit of Boris Becker in him too.
Yeah, maybe now. He's got his eye on Russert. Yeah, that looks quite like Phil Simms there. Yeah. Just work in these other ones to get their check for the episode. This guy who looks like a human cartoon character, doesn't he? Yeah, if you did an outline in his face in pencil, you'd probably think, "Oh, that's a cartoon character." Because it's like
so hard on him.
Yeah, but I'm not saying he's looking. I'm just saying.
Earlier you said he looked like he was 14, and now you say he looks like a cartoon character.
Well, that's it. Yes. I never said an ugly cartoon character. Just an interesting, interesting features.
Yes, he could be one of the Cosby kids. Fat Albert.
Right.
He does look a little bit like a Cosby kid. I'll give you that.
This was this amused me a little bit. Global forecast: warming with vanishing ski slopes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we mentioned him, the D guy.
Mm-hmm.
Goatee. Baggy 90s clothes. Bagginess. Shell suit. And then, well, it's another, yeah, Clayton the Birth. Well, it seems that with Clayton the Birth, every time he comes in, he like earns his money because it's not like he's in for like these ones that are sort of like in the background, like only our little, like with.
Yeah, he only had one brief scene. I guess that's why he ended up in the end credits instead of the beginning.
I think he's convincing at being. I think he's convincing.
Yeah, I think so too.
That kind of, and he's not written like as like entirely. He's sort of written as competent enough, Barnfather, and the political points were that was all good. That it all seemed that had that ring of truth about it, like with the way the politics was. So it was an episode with a lot of ring of truth about it.
Yep.
And all the issues. Yeah, I liked all the Nation of Islam stuff, and then and I was sympathetic towards the police officer for the situation he was put in.
Morgan doesn't like Russert, so.
Oh, why doesn't Morgan like Russert?
He finds her annoying, I think, is the main reason. And he thinks she's an NF. I don't. I'm not entirely convinced of that, but it's possible, I guess. Because if you have the scene, with the hearing where Munch was kind of sticking to the facts of what happened, where Russert was talking about how Gardy seemed like, he was nervous or he was,
she's like trying to intuit all these things about, all his intentions. It's just Gardy.
Yeah,
he does trash like that all the time. So she's probably like some ENFJ because she blends in kind of to where people think she's a normal person, but she's really not.
Isn't a normal person.
That's fair enough to say that
That's
ends
why
are not
he-
normal.
Because I don't like ENFJs. They are the toxic waste of this earth.
Man, harsh.
Well, Jonathan Campbell makes a good case for Hitler being an ENFJ. So Morgan can point to him. See, ENFJ is no good. Oprah, Hitler, no good.
Oh. Yeah, Oprah sucks. True.
Yeah, so I give this episode about 8 out of 10.
I will also give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think Munch could have been written a little better. Some of these episodes, Munch comes off as a bit sloppy, and he could be written as a bit smarter. I think maybe sometimes because there's never really a situation where it's he that says, "Hang on a minute, let's look into this a little bit deeper." So,
well, I don't know. I think there might have been a few occasions where he did that, but
yeah, it's hard to remember. But I think this wasn't a particularly, you know what I mean? Like sometimes he's written as like a sloppy guy, right? An ENTP.
Yeah. I mean, but it's been established, it's been consistent in his character that he isn't the most detailed of the detectives, for sure. He does have good instincts about things a lot of times, but he's, he does kind of have, he's a bit cynical and doesn't really, he doesn't see the job as some kind of thing where he's crusading for truth or anything like that. He just sees it as, this is stuff that happens and I'm just doing the job, and he'd rather talk about stuff that's not as much related to the job.
I would like it if sometimes it would be like to show like some like the positive side of ENTPs, like be a bit maybe insightful, creative, something come up with something like that.
I think there are better Munch episodes to come. I'll just put it that way. There's a few. Yeah, that was a pretty good Munch episode. Morgan mentioned, he said the one with the poet. And he'll have some more opportunities coming up for some good stuff. But before that, up next, we have the season finale of season 4, which is a significant episode for several reasons. But I won't spoil them, except to say the title is Work-Related.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a particularly attention-grabbing title, but it's an interesting episode, and will definitely have an impact on the future of the show. I'll just say that. And one other thing I was going to say is, I said way back at the beginning of season 4 that there would be 3 long-term characters introduced in this season, and we've now had all 3 of those. So this was the episode that, Kellerman is obviously the most significant of the 3 because he's a main cast member, one of the detectives. But the other 2 have been introduced as guest characters, but will be back for more shenanigans in the future. And the third of those was this episode. So
you see, in other series, I'd be able to work out who it is because usually it'd be someone who could like act better than the others. But this has like uniformly good acting, so it's like harder to work out.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say one of them's a good guy and one of them's a bad guy.
Ooh.
So yeah, join us for Work-Related, the season finale of season 4 next time.
It's goodbye for me, folks.
Bye.
Night.